So in the session today, I'm going to be demonstrating the new Power CLI commands for VMware vSphere. VMware vSphere Replication, get that bit right, by Broadcom. I'm going to show you how they can be used to implement and monitor protection of your virtual machines. The best bit about VMware vSphere Replication and Power CLI is they're both free products. So you can protect your applications, but you're also protecting your budget. So I'm going to use some Power CLI to connect to our vReplication server. I'm going to set up some replication, and then we're going to show how we can monitor that. My name's Chris Bradshaw. I spend my days working as an IT engineer in higher education, where on premises I'm designing and building infrastructure in vSphere, and I also do a little bit of that Azure stuff out in the cloud. Outside of the office I have a blog called IT Should Just Work, where I share the sort of technical stuff that I've learnt about, and you can look me up there or on your social media of choice. So has everyone here used VMware vSphere Replication before? Anyone hasn't? No? Couple? Okay, that's cool. So I'm going to very briefly just flip through what these two products are. First up, Power CLI. Power CLI is the VMware module for PowerShell. So if you've used PowerShell, you've used modules, this is the one that controls your VMware stuff, and it talks to vSphere, NSX, replication, SRM, all sorts of things. vSphere Replication is a component of vSphere for replicating at the host level, at the hypervisor level. So it's providing resilience to your VMs with recovery point objectives, all the way from 5 minutes up to 24 hours. You can check that your RPO is compliant. There's some failover tools in there. And in VMware's words, it's providing host-based asynchronous replication of virtual machines. And it's used by Site Recovery Manager, SRM. But it's part of vSphere and included in your vSphere licensing. So if you've got Essentials Plus or higher, all the way up to Enterprise Plus and beyond, replication is included in that already. So I say it's free. It's kind of free in that you've probably already paid for it. SRM, Site Recovery Manager, is essentially an orchestration layer. It's a separate paid product. You pay per VM for it. But the engine underneath that it uses for host-based replication is vSphere Replication, the free thing. So what does it look like? This is taken from the VMware website, and you have two sites. You'd probably have multiple hosts on each side, and VMs are replicated from a production site to a DR site, although you can go both ways. So I have a setup where I work. We have two data centers. They're a mile and a bit apart, and we run live VMs in both. They're both production sites, but some of the virtual machines in site A will replicate to site B and vice versa. So if we lose site B, we can just turn on those replicas of those machines on site A. It's installed as an appliance, so vSphere Replication appears as an appliance or a set of appliances, so it's very easy to install. It's just another OVF file, type some parameters in, off it goes. It's storage agnostic. So here I've said vSAN on both sides, but you could have a traditional SAN. You could have a NAS, an NFS NAS. You could even use direct attached storage, your local disks. And the source and the destination, the target, don't need to be the same. So You might have vSAN in your production environment and a cheaper NAS device in your DR environment. That still works fine. It doesn't care that they're different things. If you're using storage level replication, so I don't know, you've got a Dell Isilon SAN over here, then you'll also need a Dell Isilon SAN on that side. But because this is all done at the host level, it doesn't care what's underneath. This is a demo environment I built for today, just to show you can do this on a much smaller scale. This will run on my laptop, but not at the same time as PowerPoint, so it's not running on my laptop today, unfortunately. We have a vCenter server, obviously, you know, we're controlling the thing. We have 2 ESXi hosts. You could probably get away with 1 here. You've got the vReplication virtual appliance needs to be installed within that vCenter's domain. And then each host has a local data store. And one of these has my test VM on, and one's ready to receive the replication target. So you can build all that. You can build all that nested in on VMware Workstation, on your home lab, in the corner, nested in the corner of your production data center in the office, if you can do that sort of thing. It's all quite small. Licensing-wise, I did this with my vExpert licenses, so I'm a VMware vExpert. They kindly give me some free licenses for non-production use to play around with these things. If you're a VMUG Advantage subscriber, subtle plug, their licenses will do it. And if you want to just have a play around with it and you're going to do it in less than a month or 2, you can actually do this on the trial licenses, because you get 60 days or 90 days for all these components without paying any money. So if you want to go and have a play, it doesn't have to cost you anything other than a bit of compute. The one thing missing off this diagram is DNS. As you probably all know, if you've ever deployed any of these things, if it doesn't have working DNS, it doesn't work. You can do workarounds with IP addresses for naming everything with an IP address, but it's a pain in the... So just download one of these little pre-built DNS appliances. Everything goes much easier. Consider that a lesson learned that I'm passing on there. So, until earlier this year, PowerCLI didn't support vSphere replication. So we'll have a quick look at how that came about. And the journey started in 2008 when PowerCLI 1.0 was released. So PowerShell itself was only a couple of years old at this point. We were on ESXi 3.5, and VMware built these modules, I think they were plugins at the time, that allow you to control some of your VMware environment, some of your vSphere environment from PowerShell. And this is great. In 2011, Site Recovery Manager 5 came along, which included this vSphere replication for host-based replication. So there had been other versions of that. That was the first one that had vSphere replication in it. And again, so that's ESXi 5 we're talking there. Let me go along a bit. What happened next? Oh, PowerCLI 5.5 came along in 2014, and that supported SRM. So now you could talk to your paid-for SRM license product, but you couldn't talk to the vSphere replication. And people obviously, wanted, well, I've got this thing, I'm using this free product, can I talk to it with PowerShell? Now, the earliest official request I could find for this was on the PowerCLI ideas site. So this still exists, so we could go back and look this up. And in 2017, someone posted on there, wouldn't it be great if I could control my vSphere replication with PowerCLI? And lots of people sort of joined in the conversation in the comments on that and said, oh yeah, I want to do that. That would be great. I'd use it for this use case and so on. But nothing much happened. You know, it is a bit sort of, and this presentation might be letting the cat out of the bag. You can do a lot of what SRM does for free once you can do that. You can't do all of it, but you can certainly do a lot. Last year, so we're now on vSphere 8, vSphere Replication 8.6, the appliance version 8.6 was released, and this included a REST API. So once you've got a REST API, you can talk to the innards of any application, and then you can write a PowerShell module for it. Because a PowerShell module for all of these things is essentially just a wrapper for an API. And that's what happened. So in April this year, PowerCLI 13.1 came along, and that had vSphere replication support built in. And there was much rejoicing. So let's have a look at how it works. I'm going to start with connecting to vSphere replication. Well, actually, before that, I'm just going to make sure we've got PowerCLI installed. So for that, we use install module, vmware.powercli. And if anybody wants these, I've got a QR code at the end with the slide deck and a load of links to posts on how to do all of this. But we're saying we want to install the module, and that will go off to the PowerShell gallery and come back and install PowerCLI. In this one, it was already installed, so it didn't fill the screen full of text. And then we can use get module. So this is all native PowerShell stuff. VMware.powercli, and we can see that version 13.2 is installed, which is good. We needed 13.1 or higher, so we're good to go. Before I go on, I'm not going to apologise for not having a live demo, but I was looking at doing all this with live demo, but you don't want to sit here and look at the top of my head while I make a load of typos, basically. Some people can present PowerShell very well typing on a laptop. If you ever get the chance to look up Jeffrey Snover's videos from TechEd back in the day, that guy can talk and make typos, and that's all just part of the show. For me, I make the typo and it goes wrong, and then I get flustered or whatever, and you don't need that. Hopefully this is going to give you all a better experience, although less mistakes to laugh at. So we've made sure we've got the right version of PowerCLI. We now need to get some information together. So we now need to connect to our replication appliance. So for that, we use a connect VR server command here. So if you've used PowerCLI and talked to vSphere, to vCenter, you've got a connect VI server. This is essentially doing the same thing, but we're connecting directly to the replication server. We're not connecting to vCenter. And we give it some credentials. Obviously, in your production environment, you wouldn't put your password in plain text. You do nicer PowerShell things with that. You wouldn't have your password as VMware1 ! Either, hopefully. It's a demo. And we've got that, and we can call this connection object back and just make sure we've got a load of information. So we know we've got something back. We're good to proceed. Oh yes, we are good to proceed. So we're going to do some replication. Image from Bing AI. So I thought I'd mention AI somewhere in this. I should have put that in the advert, but anyway. We're going to get a load of information first. So before we can actually turn on the replication, we need to basically get the IDs and parameters of everything that we want. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get the ID of the pairing. So when we've set up vSphere replication, when we've installed the product, we've set up a pairing. So essentially that would be a pairing between this vCenter and that vCenter. I'm replicating within the same vCenter because I've only installed one. You can still do that. You don't need two vCenters. So that makes this easier because I've only got to get one vCenter ID and one pairing ID. So we're using the invoke VR get VR pairings commandlet and then trimming out the bits we want, and the invoke VR get VR info. Now you'll notice a pattern here. Most of the commandlets we're using use invoke-vr something. That's invoke re-replication and then basically an API call. So as a warning, the documentation for the Power CLI module is quite light. It's a bit sort of, well, we fed it into the auto generator and got something out the other end, job's a good one. But you can find out a load of information from the API documentation, which is a bit better. And all of these get VR info and get VR pairings equate to the API commands. So there's a lot more information there if you can't find what you want in the Power CLI documentation. So we've gone off and we've got these two values and they've come back as GUIDs. And we can call up those values there, call up those objects, just get them back. Always a good idea to check before proceeding that you've got something in those variables, because if you don't, weird stuff happens if they're empty. So if you're building a big script to automate something with this, I'd recommend checking them and checking that they're a sort of valid GUID at that point. The next things we need to get are the VM we're going to replicate and the target data stores. So the target data stores, big breath for this one, is invoke VR get VR capable target data stores. So someone at VMware is writing tongue twisters for a living. And the slightly easier, invoke VR get local VMs. But for both of these, we're passing the pairing ID and the vCenter ID that we got in the previous slide. We're filtering on data store 2 as the data store name. So my environment has two data stores, data store 1 where the VM's living and data store 2 where it's replicating to. The VM is called my VM for simplicity. And we've got those two. We also need to get the disks of the virtual machine, because essentially when we're replicating the disks. There's that little config file for the VM, but most of a VM is actually its disks. We're not replicating the memory state, that doesn't come across. This isn't like a live vMotion thing. We're just replicating the disks. So this bit at the very bottom here, hopefully you can all see. If not, as I say, there's a link at the end where you can zoom in a bit further. That's setting up replication on each disk in turn. So we're looping through the disks attached to that VM. We're making sure they're enabled for replication. We're getting the data store ID where it lives. And we're basically making an array, this VM disks array, of all the disks that are attached. So if there's just one OS disk attached, there'll only be one thing in there. If it's got a load of data disks as well, we'll end up with a big long array. So we can take that and we now need to make the full replication spec. So this is one big variable, essentially, which says all the items we're going to set, all the configuration things we're going to set. So we've got our VM disks and our VM ID and the vCenter ID that we've collected already. And then we've got lots of other things we're setting, like the RPO in minutes. So we're going to set a 15-minute RPO on this. You know, we want the replicated copy to be at most 15 minutes old. We're going to turn on network compression. We're going to auto-replicate new disks. So if in the future we add another disk to this virtual machine, we want that to automatically be included in replicas from then on. We don't want to go find out 6 months later when we have an accident that we were only replicating half of the VM and not the important disk we'd added down the line. And we collect all this information together put it in this replication spec variable using, that one, initialize VR configure replication spec. And now we're ready to actually do something with it. So now we're going to turn on replication. And we have this invoke VR configure replication, because we're configuring replication. We give it that pairing ID and that big long spec object from the previous slide. And that creates a task. This doesn't happen instantly. It takes a little bit of time to set that up. So our code can then just basically check if that task has finished. And we use invoke VR get task info to do that and just feed it the ID from here. And because I ran this straight away, we've got running. It's configuring a virtual machine for replication. It's configuring my VM. There's some times in very long numbers. So that's off and running. But we check back, and now it says success. This was, I think, about 30 seconds later. Ran the same command again. It now says success. So you could have like a while loop or something, just waiting for that to come back saying, I'm done. And we could look at this in the GUI. So if we drop into the web client, so this, if you haven't seen it, this is what the replication web client looks like. I know it says Site Recovery at the top, but I don't have Site Recovery Manager installed or anywhere on this system. If you go into vCenter, once you've installed replication, you will get a Site Recovery menu. It takes you to a page with Site Recovery at the top, but it's not Site Recovery Manager. It's still the free one. And we're saying we're doing replications within the same vCenter server, as I mentioned earlier. I've only got the one vCenter here for simplicity. And here is my VM, and it's doing its initial sync. So it started copying the data from the live VM to the replication target data store. And we can see all of the config items that match up with that big config variable we did. So, the auto-replicate new disks is enabled. Network compression was enabled. Our RPO was 15 minutes. And it's got the sizes, so it looks like the disk is 21 meg and it's 15 meg into it. This is a very tiny VM. Link at the end to how to get this. It's great as a test load for things like this. It's created by a chap called Vladan, who I met through the VMware community. It's on his website. You can download it, and it's a 21 meg working VM. So if you want something that you can turn on and check vMotion works, but it works very quickly because it's tiny, this is great for that. So that's great. We've set up replication. We've turned on replication. Our VM is now protected. Let's see if we can do some monitoring. Now, obviously, there's lots of monitoring stuff included in vSphere replication and vCenter. You can configure alerts for, like normal vCenter alerts for RPO violations and so on, and it will send you an email saying, or a Teams alert or a ticket or whatever, however you configured it, saying, this VM has breached its RPO. It's been 16 minutes since I last replicated it. Something's going on. But if we've got the ability to check that status and that configuration with Power CLI, then we can integrate with lots of other systems. Good example of this, where I work, we have a CMDB, which is meant to be the source of truth for all our virtual machines. So when we want to create a server, we create an entry in the CMDB, and then the build process goes from there. If we included in the CMDB what the RPO should be, so we say the RPO should be 15 minutes for that virtual machine, we can make sure our build process builds it using the code we've just done and turns on replication. But we can also run code later on to check that the config in the CMDB matches what's going on in real life, in vSphere in general. So, for example, we can check, has someone changed the RPO? Has someone gone in here and said, oh, system's a bit busy today, I'm going to change the RPO to 30 minutes. Or turned it off entirely. It's not working, I'll just turn that off and come back to it and then forgotten about it. These things happen. You get the configuration drift. So it'd be great if we can go, this is what my database, my configuration database says it should look like. This is what it actually looks like. If those two are different, either fix it or tell someone, and usually tell someone, but you could automate it being fixed. And this is kind of an example that sums up what we can do in that space. So I've got the commandlet here, invoke vr get all replications. Obviously, that's going to get all the configured replications. I've given it the pairing ID and the vCenter GUID again, which I'd have gone and collected again if this was a new session. The extended info flag here brings back a load of extra information. There's all sorts of useful and exciting numbers and facts and figures in there. But in this example, I've just done a nice little PowerShell select here and said, I just want to know the name of the VM, the status of the replication, whether that's violating its RPO, and what the RPO timer is set to. And that produces a nice little table, very little here because I've only got that one VM, that's saying my VM, RPO is active, boxes. It's still within its RPO, it's not violating its RPO, and the RPO is set to 15 minutes. So nice little one-liner there has gone off and got that information that I could then compare with my CMDB. Hopefully that's just sort of illustrating the possibilities. I'm not going to go through screens and screens and screens of more PowerShell stuff of, oh, you could do this or you could do this. It's just you can get access to all that information that's set there now. So what are the use cases for this replication and PowerCLI pairing? If you've got a limited budget, and if you haven't got a limited budget and you're hiring, please come and catch me afterwards. But if you've got a limited budget, that per VM licensing of SRM might put you off. You might not be able to afford the replication on all the VMs that you want to replicate. It might be that, well, actually, I could buy all those SRM licenses, or I could buy some ARIA licenses, or some more hosts. There's always that choice. Excuse me. But you can mix and match. So you might say, well, I've got enough budgets that my gold tier VMs get full-on SRM, all the bells and whistles protection, but my silver level, I still want to replicate them, but I'm going to go with this bit more roll your own method using PowerCLI. It might be you can't afford SRM at all. You've made that choice. The PowerCLI gives you an option to do something with it. It might be in your home lab. You can use it there. A branch office, a small office, a test dev environment. And the test dev's a good example of this. You might have test or development workloads that are quite transitive, ephemeral. They're not going to be around forever. You don't want to go out and buy a license to replicate them, but they're actually quite important. If dev's your business, then those dev environments are actually, very important. I know we always say, oh, that's just test and dev, but that's actually important. So you might want to replicate that, but you don't want to go out and buy a license just to replicate that VM that's not going to be there in 2 months' time or something when that project's done. So you can use it for that. The other use case for this is data center migration. If you're moving from one vCenter to another, you can use this. Again, you don't want to go out and buy SRM licenses for that one-off operation. You can go from vCenter here to vCenter in AWS with this. That still works. Obviously, there's other things there. There's cross-seat vCenter vMotion is a thing that you might want to consider, especially if you've got like a low latency between your old and new vCenters. HCX, if you're going to the cloud, is worth considering. This is kind of a low-tech, low-budget option that, you know, is on the table for some or all of your migration work. So, what did we learn today, it says? Yes. So hopefully today I've explained briefly what vSphere replication and Power CLI are, when those features became available, a bit on how to use it. So I've done connecting, we've done replicating, setting up a replication, and monitoring that replication. A bit on why would you use it as well. So I've got a what, when, how, why. The who is new lot and the when. Oh no, I've done when. Yeah, so yeah, go for it. And that brings me to the end. This is this QR code links to the resources. So I've put a blog post together that has, well, it's got this slide deck on, and it's got links to a number of blog posts and bits of VMware documentation, which should hopefully explain more and allow you to take that further. And any questions?
Can it script the recovery process?
Not that I'm aware of.
I was going to say, because then it literally...
This is a bit of a, yeah.
Can't imagine they'd give you that.
Yeah.
And it is basically replacing SRM.
You could then replace SRM totally, or a third party could release a product that did the same. Yeah, I have seen people write code that's kind of hacking it because the replication is essentially a VMDK and the config file. You can rebuild it. Yeah. But yeah, there isn't a what do we invoke VR fail over my VM commandlet, unfortunately. But having said that, if your failover is just one VM, then that's not too much clicking to do. No. If your failover is 100 VMs, it is a lot of clicking, but that's why they sell SRM for. Yeah. Any other questions or comments, or anyone used this and had an exciting journey with it? No?
I think where to be useful. I've set all this up before, but don't actually deploy the VMs it protects. But every time people forget to protect their VMs, so even just having a script that basically, it's just applied a basic replication policy, because I know in my environment, every VM with a particular name, start in the naming convention, should be replicated. So I could probably use that to automate the replication.
Yeah,
if they haven't done it.
Or tags, custom attributes, a great way of saying that, this should be replicated. That's fair. But yeah, I've run a report saying, come back and tell me.
VMs aren't replicated where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, common problem. I think I've definitely been in a situation. I've looked down my thing. It's like no one's set replication up on that, or that's been changed and edited. And being able to get that list and compare that, even if you just compare that manually once in a while, is good. Cool. Well, thank you very much. I'll let you get off to your coffee break.